Hey guys, Paul here. I know it's been a while, but I'm back to talk about why I'm kind of just tired of the extra deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's a little complicated, we'll get into it, but first, a really funny thing. So we've been playing with the new Yu-Gi-Oh! Two-player starter deck. It comes with this like comic book thing that has the scripted duel that's supposed to like teach new players. And I just came across this really funny passage I wanted to share where basically they're describing the different extra deck monster types, and they just talk about like the colors they are. Like Synchro's white, Xyz is black, Link's blue, and then for pendulums, they're just like, it's complicated. I don't know. If you ever needed more evidence that Konami does not seem to like pendulum monsters, you have it there. So that was funny. Anyway, okay. The actual topic of today's video, though, is that I am really tired of the extra deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! More specifically, I am tired of generic extra deck monsters that kind of feel like they steal the spotlight from decks' actual strategies and actual boss monsters. This is not a new complaint. I've talked about this in the past. I just think it's one of those issues that you kind of got to talk about it every now and again because there's usually new staple sort of extra deck monsters that come out. Like in the past year, we've gotten Bestial Dissipator, Chaos Angel, and probably most prominently SP Little Knight. And I don't know. I think like these cards really are starting to sort of stifle just deck building and card design a little bit because so many modern Yu-Gi-Oh decks will do, a really cool combo or whatever, or have a really neat, unique gimmick, and they'll even have main deck boss monsters. But ultimately, what a lot of it can come down to is how many of these generic extra deck monsters does your deck spit out. It doesn't really matter if you're playing Blue Eyes or Super Heavy Samurai if the end goal is to still end on the same kind of set of extra deck cards. You'll see this a lot in Yu-Gi-Oh deck profiles where it'll be like cool like Red Eyes deck or cool, insert really whatever rogue or kind of just fun strategy you want deck. But when it's like combos, it usually tends to just be, okay, you end on Barone, you end on Borreload Savage, Apollosa. All of these different cards that just sort of like, they're the same thing. There are even ones that kind of just play roles in combos. Chaos Ruler, I know it's banned now, but like when that was around, that was a really universally just used card in a lot of different strategies. I play lots of Master Duels, so obviously I see a lot of Thunder Dragon Colossus, and DPE is still fairly frequently seen on Master Duel as well, and that one can get really annoying. And so, the main thing I have about this is that it sucks when you're trying to build a new deck and you realize that it's just better to go into a generic sort of omni-negating extra deck monster instead of your deck's boss monster. And there are a lot of solutions to this that people have brought up, and I'll just bring them up again because I tend to mostly agree with them. The first is just that most of these extra deck monsters really should not have been as generic as they are. This goes for your cards like Barone, where like maybe it could have taken a Wind monster or even Wind Warriors or something like that, where it's like pretty closely tied to just being played in the deck that it's from, the floor, it's like Synchron and all that stuff, the floor knight deck. But that could also apply to like Borreload Savage Dragon. Why does it not take using a rocket monster or even like maybe a Dark Dragon, although that's barely even really, that's not a limitation in today's Yu-Gi-Oh! Really, but you know what I mean. So things like that could have really been great. I also think that this even applies a little bit to the combo making cards. That's kind of where your Izolds come in, which, we've been seeing a lot more of those Link monsters getting banned. But when you think about like the Christian Halki Firebrax and like how that sort of terrorized the game for so long, it was a card that really could have just used a restriction of like needing a Crystron tuner or needing like two Crystron monsters or something like that. Isold, like I said, that's a really good example. But I think the second thing outside of just making it where like these cards take materials from their home archetypes is to make generic extra deck monsters significantly weaker. And by weaker, I mean they could either have weaker effects or weaker stats or even both. So a really good example might be, okay, if we're gonna make Baron de Fleur be completely just, generic and any deck can make it, then maybe its attack points should be a lot less. Like it's quite low for a level 10 synchro. So maybe instead of 3,000 attack, you give it like 24, 2,500 attack, right? And you also maybe slightly nerf its effect a little bit. Instead of just being able to pop a card in the field, you have to discard a card and then you can pop a card in the field. So there's maybe a little bit of like, a cost tied to it. Or with the negation, you can discard a card to get the negate, right? I think that these are little things that would add up to make Barone perhaps feel like a lower value monster to go into. Now, granted, still getting a pop and getting a negate is still very good. We've seen what happened with like Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, but I just think that like a deck's level 10 synchro should be more worth making than Barones. I think that you could even like put in, even more. You can go so far with this. Like another really good example to me is Borreload Savage Dragon. If you're not going to make it take rocket monsters, then maybe the link monster in your graveyard that like it targets and equips should have to be a dark dragon monster. That would be really nice. There's also things like Access Code Talker and Boral Sword Dragon, kind of more in the past on that one, where like they're just kind of OTK enablers. They can just finish a game off really quickly. Again, don't know why like access code had to be generic, but sure, cool, whatever. If that's the case though, then maybe its attack points could be lower, the amount it gains could be less. It can maybe only attack monsters instead of like being able to attack directly. I think you just gotta like tie in some sort of a downside. And even if we take the conversation away from boss monsters, there are other cards where I think this has been done fairly well, like the Nightmare monsters. So I think of things like Nightmare Cerberus and Nightmare Phoenix, where Nightmare Cerberus and Phoenix take 2 monsters to make, and then when you make them, you still have to discard another card just to pop a spell or trap with, say, like Nightmare Phoenix, right? And I think that that's a really good place to be in terms of balance. Their attack points aren't high, they're just a way to out something if your deck has no other way of doing it. So it kind of turns your extra deck into a useful toolbox, but one that certainly has some costs attached. I think if you have an in-archetype boss monster or an in-archetype link or whatever that's sort of supposed to be able to do things for you, it should do a better job of that thing than a Nightmare Phoenix or Nightmare Cerberus should. And then you get into things like SP Little Knight, where I'm just kind of like, well, I mean, it has summoning requirements, right? If it like takes extra deck monsters, that's sort of something. But I do still think that it's crazy that just this like Link 2 monster is so much better at outing things and kind of just getting value turn over turn than most decks, in archetype, in theme cards. And then all of this is a little bit more of a shame because Yu-Gi-Oh! Finally has been getting some pretty neat main deck strategies. For a long time, I feel like it hasn't had that. So like if you think about, there's a few decks. What's a really good one? I'd say Snake Eyes actually, if you just play like the pure Snake Eye deck. Like the Flamberg Dragon is a really cool main deck sort of boss monster thing. I think Rescue Ace is a really good example of this. Or a deck I've been playing a lot is Vanquish Soul, where you're not really using the X deck very much outside of Rock of the Vanquisher, which is certainly not a boss monster and can't even attack or anything. So I don't know. I feel like playing decks that have strong main deck strategies that help you sort of deviate from just making the same extra deck monsters over and over and over it's just, I don't know, it's kind of been more refreshing for me. I've found that I really like those decks a bit more, or some of the decks that you guys kind of have heard that I play, like Rika, stuff like that, where it's plant locked, so at least I'm only able to play plant Xyz monsters or link monsters or whatever for the most part. And in that way, it sort of keeps it on theme and restricts just my ability to be like, okay, I can get a bunch of Rikas in the field and just make an Apollosa or whatever. So I don't know. I find that this is not the world's biggest problem, but it just makes me get a little bit exasperated with the extra deck. Because when I play, and I play a lot of different decks, but I feel like I'm facing the same inboard threats, it's just not really very exciting, is it? But maybe this is just me kind of complaining about it. I mean, this could be still spun as a bit of a good thing, right? Like these extra deck monsters ensure or help to ensure that maybe super lower tier strats do have something strong they can make, right? Where you can just make a Barone even if your deck doesn't like have anything strong, at least you got that. So maybe that's sort of an argument for it. I don't know. I'd love to hear what you guys think about it though. I mean, I'm not going to say that the extra deck has ruined Yu-Gi-Oh! That's sort of a different conversation about the way that link monsters work or Xyz or synchros. So different, video made for a different time. But more so just I'm tired of generic extra deck monsters that feel like they are homogenizing the deck building, deck kind of playing experience. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. I would really love to hear it, and I should be back tomorrow with more regular videos like this that are just different Yu-Gi-Oh! Conversations. So make sure that you drop a like, leave your thoughts, subscribe to APS Amplifier. I would really like to get 100,000 subscribers, and hope that maybe Konami regrets printing things like this. Jesus Christ, I gotta be so mean to the pendulum players. Jesus. All right, it's gonna be it. See you in the next one. Fast turn.